The bridge of the UES Defiant hummed with mismatched electronics. Salvaged Martian displays flickering beside jury-rigged Luna colony processors, all cobbled together with humanity's trademark stubborn ingenuity. Brendan Matthews stood at the center of it all, his weathered hands gripping a small metal tool he'd carried since his engineering days, watching the chaos unfold across 40 different view screens. "Sir, we're getting reports from every monitoring station in the system," Communications Officer Torres called out, her voice tight with disbelief. "The message, it's broadcasting on every frequency, military, civilian, even the old mining channels." Brendan's hazel eyes cut through the bridge's controlled chaos, landing on Anne Reeves, hunched over her tactical console. Her fingers danced across holographic displays, green eyes darting between streams of data as she processed the Galactic Communications Network's response to Earth's unprecedented broadcast. "We're coming." 2 words. Simple. Direct. Broadcast simultaneously across every inhabited system in the galaxy, cutting through the Kavran Dominion's communication monopoly like a blade through silk. No preamble. No explanation. Just a promise that had sent shockwaves through an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 3 centuries. "And talk to me," Brendan said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had earned him command of this desperate mission. "What's the Dominion's reaction?" Anne tilted her head slightly, that telltale sign she was unraveling something complex. "Panic would be too strong a word," she said, her tone crisp with analysis. "But their communication patterns just shifted. Priority channels are lighting up like a Christmas tree. They're scrambling to understand how we bypass their censorship protocols." And a faint smirk crossed Anne's face. "They can't. Every time they try to trace the signal, it bounces through 17 different relay points before hitting another broadcast node. Whoever planned this made sure the galaxy would hear us whether the Dominion wanted it or not." Brendan felt his jaw tighten, his fingers working the metal tool as he processed the implications. Earth's message hadn't been a declaration of war, it had been a statement of intent. After decades of watching colony after colony fall to the Dominion's expansion, humanity had finally decided to push back. "Sir," Torres interrupted, "priority message from Sol Command." The main screen flickered, displaying Admiral Bedford's stern face. Even through the static of long-range transmission, her determination was unmistakable. "Commander Matthews, Operation Vanguard is a go. You are to take the assembled fleet to the Valthor system and begin liberation operations. Intelligence indicates the Dominion has 47 vessels in the region, including 3 heavy cruisers. Your fleet composition is irregular, but Command believes unconventional tactics may be our only advantage." Brendan's eyes swept across the tactical display showing his so-called armada. 40 ships, half of them converted freighters, a quarter obsolete military vessels, and the rest civilian craft hastily armed with whatever weapons they could mount. Against a Dominion fleet of over 200 vessels, it should have been suicide. Should have been. The Dominion has ruled through fear and superior firepower for 3 centuries, Admiral Bedford continued. They've never faced an enemy that refused to follow their rules. Show them what humanity can do when we stop playing by their book. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Brendan turned to face his crew. Engineers from the Belt, former colonial defense pilots, even a few ex-pirates who'd taken amnesty in exchange for their expertise. Not the polished Navy Earth had once dreamed of, but something perhaps more dangerous. Humans with nothing left to lose. "You heard the Admiral," Brendan said, his voice carrying across the bridge. "The Dominion thinks they know us. They've studied our tactics, our technology, our psychology. They're counting on us to be predictable." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the faces of his crew. "They're about to learn they don't know us at all." Anne's fingers stilled on her console. "Brendan, I'm reading massive spikes in Dominion military communications. They're mobilizing fleets across 17 systems. Earth's message didn't just get their attention, it terrified them." "Good," Brendan said, tucking the metal tool into his pocket. "Fear makes people make mistakes, and we're going to need all the mistakes we can get." The bridge erupted into controlled activity as the crew prepared for the jump to Valthor. Navigation calculated hyperspace routes, Engineering prepped the hodgepodge of FTL drives, and weapon systems ran final diagnostics on armaments that ranged from cutting-edge plasma cannons to century-old kinetic sluggers. "Fleet's ready for jump," Anne reported, her tactical display showing the 40 ships of humanity's vanguard arranged in a loose formation. "Valthor system in 6 hours. Brendan nodded, settling into his command chair. Through the forward viewport, he could see the other ships of the fleet, each one a testament to human stubbornness and ingenuity. They weren't the sleek, uniform vessels of the Dominion. They were patchwork, improvised, held together by determination and hope. They were perfectly, utterly human. "All ships, this is Commander Matthews," he broadcast to the fleet. "We're about to do something that's never been done before. We're going to take the fight to the Dominion in their own backyard with ships they'd laugh at and tactics they've never seen. They expect us to be civilized, to follow the rules of engagement they've written." He paused, thinking of Earth's simple message broadcast across the galaxy. "We're coming." They're about to learn that humanity didn't ask for their permission to exist. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars elongated into lines of light as 40 human ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of every oppressed world in the galaxy. Behind them, Earth's message continued to echo across the cosmos, a promise that would reshape the balance of power forever. The Dominion had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. Now it was their turn to be afraid. The Valthor system's asteroid belt stretched before them like a graveyard of shattered worlds, each tumbling rock a potential hiding place or weapon. Brendan stood at the tactical display, watching as Anne's fingers danced across the holographic interface, transforming the chaotic debris field into a 3-dimensional battleground. "Dominion Patrol, 3 ships bearing 27 Mark IV, Anne reported, her voice carrying the sharp focus that meant she was already 3 steps ahead of the enemy. "Light cruiser and 2 frigates, standard sweep pattern. They're not expecting company." Brendan rubbed his jaw scar, studying the tactical projection. The Dominion ships moved with the predictable precision of a force that had never faced real opposition. Their patrol route followed textbook parameters, efficient and thorough, exactly what he'd hoped for. "Deploy the ghosts," he ordered. Anne's smirk was barely visible, but Brendan caught it. She'd been working on this particular surprise for weeks, turning salvaged mining drones into something the Dominion had never encountered. Her fingers flew across the console, and dozens of blips appeared on the tactical display, small, cheap, and utterly expendable. "Ghost Squadron away," she announced. 67 drones, each broadcasting a signature profile I pulled from our heaviest ships. To their sensors, it's going to look like a battle group. The beauty of the plan wasn't just in the deception, it was in the unpredictability. The Dominion's tactical computers would be screaming warnings about massive human reinforcements, but their commanders would be looking at sensor readings that made no sense. How could humanity have assembled such a fleet without their knowledge? "Dominion Patrol is altering course," sensors called out. "They're moving to intercept the ghost signatures." Brendan watched the enemy ships break formation, their disciplined patrol dissolving into an aggressive hunting pattern. The lead cruiser accelerated toward the largest cluster of drone signatures, while the frigates moved to flank what they thought was a human battle group. "Now comes the fun part," Anne said, her fingers hovering over the firing solution. "Their lead ship is about to get a very nasty surprise." The drones weren't just decoys, they were booby traps. Each one carried a small explosive charge and a targeting system that Anne had jury-rigged from freight container sensors. When the Dominion cruiser closed to weapons range, expecting to find human warships, it would instead find 67 very angry mining drones with nothing to lose. "Contact," sensors announced. "Dominion cruiser is engaging the ghost signatures." The main screen lit up with the distant flashes of energy weapons as the Dominion ship opened fire on what it thought were human vessels. For a moment, the universe held its breath. Then Anne's trap sprung. The drones exploded in a cascade of brilliant light, not powerful enough to destroy the cruiser, but more than sufficient to blind its sensors and overwhelm its defensive systems. In the chaos of the explosions, half a dozen drones managed to reach the ship's hull, their small charges detonating against armor plates and sensor arrays. Dominion cruiser is reporting multiple hits, communications intercepted. They're calling for reinforcements. Time to go, Brendan said, but his voice carried satisfaction rather than urgency. Anne, plot us a course deeper into the belt. Let's find somewhere quiet to watch the show. As the Defiant and her escorts slipped away between the asteroids, Brendan allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Dominion cruiser wasn't destroyed, but it was damaged, confused, and broadcasting panic to every ship in the system. More importantly, it was reporting an attack by a phantom fleet that had vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Sir," Torres called from communications, "we're intercepting Dominion chatter. They're confused. The commander is reporting engagement with a human task force of unknown composition. They can't figure out what hit them." Anne leaned back in her chair, her tactical display showing the Dominion ships frantically scanning for targets that no longer existed. Their tactical computers are going to be chewing on this for hours. How do you engage an enemy that doesn't follow the rules of physics? "The same way you eat an elephant," Brendan replied, "one bite at a time." The asteroid belt around them was filled with hiding places, hollowed-out rocks that could conceal a ship, debris fields that would mask energy signatures, and gravitational anomalies that would confuse sensors. It was a perfect hunting ground for a force that couldn't match its enemy's strength, but could outthink them at every turn. "Contact," sensors announced, 2 more Dominion ships moving to support the damaged cruiser. Brendan studied the tactical display, watching as the enemy reinforcements moved in precise formation toward their crippled comrade. They were being careful now, scanning for threats, but they were still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. "Anne, can you give me another ghost squadron?" "Already on it," she said, her hands moving across the console. "But this time I'm going to try something different. Instead of mimicking our heavy ships, I'm going to make these drones look like civilian vessels, freighters, mining ships, the kind of targets the Dominion loves to bully." Brendan's eyes narrowed as he understood the implications. "You're going to make them think they're chasing refugees." "Exactly. And when they move to intercept what they think are defenseless civilians," Anne's smile was razor-sharp, "they're going to get a very unpleasant surprise." The second wave of drones deployed with careful precision, their false signatures broadcasting the energy patterns of civilian vessels in distress. To the Dominion reinforcements, it would look like a convoy of human refugees fleeing the battle zone, exactly the kind of target their doctrine demanded they pursue and capture. "Dominion ships are taking the bait," sensors reported. "They're moving to intercept the false convoy." Brendan watched the enemy ships accelerate toward Anne's trap, their formation shifting from defensive to predatory. The Dominion had built their empire on the subjugation of weaker species, and their tactics reflected that philosophy. They were hunters, not warriors, and hunters could be lured into traps. "Detonation in 10 seconds, Anne announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The second explosion was smaller than the first, but precisely targeted. The drones had been programmed to detonate at the moment the Dominion ships powered up their tractor beams, overloading the systems and creating feedback loops that cascaded through their power grids. "Direct hits on both frigates," sensors called out. "They're reporting power failures across multiple systems." The Dominion reinforcements found themselves drifting helplessly in the asteroid belt, their engines offline and their weapons systems cycling through emergency reboots. For a few crucial minutes, they were completely vulnerable. "Now," Brendan ordered. The Defiant and her escorts emerged from their hiding places like predators striking from ambush. Their weapons might have been a hodgepodge of different technologies, but they were perfectly adequate for engaging crippled targets. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds converged on the disabled frigates, overwhelming their weakened shields and punching through their armor. "Dominion frigate subjugator is venting atmosphere," sensors reported. "The second frigate is attempting to surrender." "Negative," Brendan said, his voice cold. "No prisoners. The Dominion doesn't take prisoners from us." The battle was over in minutes. 2 Dominion frigates destroyed, 1 cruiser damaged and fleeing, and the human fleet had suffered exactly 0 casualties. It wasn't the kind of victory that would change the course of the war, but it was something more valuable, proof that the Dominion could be beaten. "Sir," Torres called from communications, "we're intercepting priority transmissions from the retreating cruiser. They're requesting immediate reinforcements and reporting engagement with unidentified human vessels employing unconventional tactics." Anne's laughter carried across the bridge. "Unconventional tactics. Is that what they're calling it when someone refuses to line up and die quietly?" Brendan tucked his metal tool back into his pocket, feeling the familiar weight of it against his fingers. The first battle was won, but it was just the beginning. The Dominion would adapt, would learn from this encounter, would prepare for the next engagement. But so would humanity, and that was a race Brendan intended to win. "Take us deeper into the belt," he ordered. "We've got work to do." The cave system beneath Valthor's third moon stretched for kilometers, carved by generations of desperate resistance fighters into a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers. Bioluminescent fungi provided the only light, their soft blue-green glow reflecting off the worried faces of the assembled Valthorians. Brendan stood at the center of the makeshift war room, conscious of the dozens of eyes watching his every move. The aliens were humanoid but unmistakably other. Their skin carried a faint luminescence that pulsed with their emotions, and their large, silvery eyes held the wariness of a people who had learned to trust nothing. "You claim to speak for Earth," the Valthorian leader said, their voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who had survived 3 decades of occupation. "Yet your ships number fewer than the Dominion's monthly patrols. How do you expect to challenge an empire that has ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the chamber, other Valthorians murmured among themselves, their bioluminescent skin flickering with shades of doubt and fear. They had been burned by false hope before, promised liberation by species that had ultimately bowed to the Dominion's power. "Because we're not trying to challenge them," Brendan said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that had brought him this far, "we're trying to embarrass them." A ripple of confusion passed through the assembled aliens. The leader's luminescence shifted to a questioning amber. "Explain." Brendan moved to the rough-hewn table at the center of the chamber, where Anne had spread her tactical displays. The holographic projections showed Valthor's star system in intricate detail. Trade routes, patrol patterns, communication networks, and the careful architecture of oppression the Dominion had built over decades. "The Dominion rules through fear," he continued. "They've convinced the galaxy that resistance is futile, that their technology and numbers make them invincible. But fear is a fragile thing. It only takes one crack to bring the whole structure down." Anne looked up from her displays, her green eyes bright with the intensity of discovery. "I've been analyzing their communication patterns for the past 6 hours. The Dominion's strength is also their weakness. They're centralized, hierarchical, predictable. Every decision flows through their command structure, and every command follows doctrine that hasn't changed in 50 years. "Which means," the Valthorian leader asked. "Which means they're not ready for us," Brendan said. "They've never faced an enemy that refuses to play by their rules. Today's engagement in the asteroid belt has them scrambling to understand what they're dealing with. Their tactical computers are running simulations that don't make sense, and their commanders are filing reports that contradict everything they thought they knew about human capabilities." He gestured to Anne's displays, where intercepted Dominion communications scrolled past in real time. "They're afraid, not of our weapons or our numbers, but of our unpredictability. They can't fight what they can't understand." The Valthorian leader's bioluminescence shifted to a deeper blue, the color of cautious hope. "What do you need from us?" "Information," Anne said, her fingers dancing across her console. "You know this system better than any outsider ever could. You know where the Dominion stores their supplies, where they're vulnerable, where they don't bother to look because they think they're safe. And in return," Brendan met the leader's gaze directly, "we give you something you haven't had in 30 years, a chance to fight back. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of Anne's electronics. The Valthorians exchanged glances, their luminescence shifting through complex patterns of communication that human eyes couldn't fully interpret. "The Dominion has a supply depot on Valthor 7, the leader finally said. "Automated defenses, minimal crew, but it supplies half the fleet in this system. They consider it impregnable because it's protected by a minefield and orbital sensors." Anne's smirk was visible even in the cave's dim light. "Automated defenses. I do love a good challenge." "There's more," another Valthorian added, their skin glowing with nervous energy. "The Dominion has been building something in the outer system, a construction project they classify as Priority Alpha. None of our people have been allowed near it, but the power requirements are enormous." Brendan felt his jaw tighten. "Super weapon?" "Unknown, but the energy signatures are unlike anything we've seen before." Anne's fingers were already flying across her console, pulling up long-range sensor data and cross-referencing it with captured Dominion communications. "I'm seeing references to Project Terminus in their encrypted channels. Whatever they're building, it's important enough to warrant direct oversight from the Dominion Council." The Valthorian leader's luminescence flickered with something that might have been amusement. "You humans are either very brave or very foolish." "Why not both?" Brendan replied. "We've found they're not mutually exclusive." For the first time since the meeting began, the Valthorian leader's skin brightened with what could only be described as a smile. "Very well, you shall have your information. But know this, if you fail, the Dominion's retribution will be swift and terrible. Our people have suffered enough." "We won't fail," Brendan said, and something in his voice made the assembled aliens pause. "We can't afford to." Over the next hour, the Valthorians shared decades of accumulated intelligence. Trade routes that avoided heavy patrols, communication frequencies the Dominion thought were secure, and most importantly, the locations of key infrastructure that kept the occupation running. Anne absorbed it all, her tactical displays growing more complex as she integrated the new information with her existing intelligence. Patterns emerged, vulnerabilities in the Dominion's seemingly impregnable network of control. "The supply depot is the key," she said finally. "It's not just a warehouse, it's a communications hub. Take it out and half the fleet in this system goes blind and deaf." "And the Project Terminus site?" Brendan asked. "Harder target. It's in the outer system, protected by a full battle group. But if we can get close enough to gather intelligence," Anne's smile was predatory, "I might be able to turn their own security against them." The Valthorian leader clasped their hands together, a gesture that made their bioluminescence pulse with determination. "When do we begin?" "Now," Brendan said, "but first we need to talk about what happens after we win." "After?" "The Dominion will send reinforcements. They'll flood this system with ships and soldiers, and they'll tear apart every rock looking for the people who humiliated them. Your people need to be ready for that." The leader's luminescence shifted to a deep, resolute blue. "We have been ready for 30 years. The question is whether you humans are ready for what you're about to unleash." Brendan thought of Earth's message, broadcast across the galaxy with such simple, devastating clarity. "We're coming. Not a threat, but a promise. And promises once made had to be kept." "We'll find out together," he said. As the meeting dispersed, Brendan found himself standing beside Anne at her tactical displays. The cave around them buzzed with quiet activity as Valthorians began making preparations for the coming battle. "Think it'll work?" Anne asked quietly. "It has to," Brendan replied, his hand finding the familiar weight of his metal tool, "because if it doesn't, we're all dead." "Cheerful as always," Anne said, but her smile took the sting out of the words. "At least we'll die doing something interesting." Outside the cave, Valthor's star cast pale light across a world that had known only oppression for 3 decades. But in the depths of the Resistance hideout, something new was stirring. A collaboration between species that had never met, united by nothing more than the shared desire to be free. The Dominion had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. Now they were about to learn that some things were stronger than fear. Hope, for instance. and the stubborn refusal to surrender that seemed to be humanity's defining characteristic. The Dominion supply depot on Valthor 7 hung in space like a mechanical spider, its 8 docking arms extending from a central hub bristling with sensor arrays and defensive weapons. Brendan studied the tactical display, noting the precise placement of automated turrets and the overlapping fields of fire that made a direct assault impossible. 18 defensive platforms, Anne reported from her position at the infiltration console, each one armed with particle beams and quantum torpedoes. The approach corridors are mined, and there's a sensor net that extends for 500,000 kilometers in every direction. Crew complement, minimal, maybe 50 Dominion personnel, mostly technicians and logistics officers. The depot is designed to be self-sufficient. Everything runs on automated systems. Brendan nodded, his fingers working the familiar metal tool as he processed the information. The Dominion's reliance on automation was both their strength and their weakness. It made their operations efficient and predictable, but it also meant they had grown complacent. They couldn't imagine an enemy that would dare to attack such a heavily defended target. "How's the security override coming?" Anne's fingers danced across her console, lines of code streaming past faster than the human eye could follow. "Their encryption is good, but it's standardized. Every Dominion facility uses the same basic protocols, just with different access codes. Give me another 20 minutes, and I should be able to create a back door." The plan was ambitious even by human standards. Instead of trying to fight their way through the depot's defenses, they were going to steal them. Anne had identified a vulnerability in the Dominion's network protocols, a maintenance channel that allowed automated systems to communicate with each other without going through the main security grid. "Contact," sensors announced. "Dominion Patrol, 2 frigates, standard sweep pattern. They'll be within scanning range in 6 minutes. Brendan checked the tactical display. The human strike force was hidden in the shadow of a small asteroid, their ships powered down to minimal emissions. They were invisible to long-range sensors, but a close-range scan would reveal them instantly. "Status on the infiltration." "Almost there," Anne said, her voice tight with concentration. "Their maintenance protocols are more complex than I thought. They've got safeguards built into safeguards, but they're all designed to prevent accidents, not intrusions." The Dominion patrol passed within 50,000 kilometers, their sensors probing the asteroid field for signs of human activity. Brendan held his breath, watching the enemy ship's search patterns on the tactical display. They were thorough but predictable, following standard doctrine that assumed any real threat would be detected long before it got this close. "Patrol is moving off," sensors reported. "We're clear." "Got it," Anne announced suddenly. "I'm in their maintenance network, uploading the override codes now." The supply depot's defenses were formidable, but they were all controlled by a central computer that had never been designed to resist infiltration from within. Anne's virus spread through the system like wildfire, rewriting targeting protocols and turning the depot's own weapons against each other. Depot's defensive platforms are reporting system malfunctions, communications intercepted. They're requesting technical support from the nearest fleet command. How long before they figure out what's happening? "Not long enough," Anne said. "I can keep their systems confused for maybe 30 minutes, but their security protocols will eventually isolate the infected nodes and purge them." Brendan nodded. 30 minutes would have to be enough. "All ships, initiate assault pattern Delta. We're going in." The human strike force emerged from the asteroid field like ghosts materializing from shadow. 6 ships, converted freighters and armed civilian vessels, accelerating toward the supply depot at maximum burn. Their approach was anything but subtle, but subtlety was no longer the point. "Depot's automated defenses are attempting to engage," sensors reported. "Weapons systems are cycling through targeting solutions but can't maintain lock." Anne's virus was working perfectly. The depot's computer systems were caught in an endless loop of conflicting instructions, trying to defend against attackers that their own protocols insisted didn't exist. The defensive platforms traversed frantically, their weapons firing at empty space while the real targets closed in unmolested. Docking Bay 7 is open, Anne announced. I've convinced their computers that we're a scheduled supply convoy. We should have unrestricted access to the facility's main data core. The lead ship, a converted cargo hauler named Persistence, settled into the depot's docking bay with practiced precision. Within minutes, Brendan was leading a boarding party through corridors that hummed with the quiet efficiency of Dominion technology. The depot's interior was a maze of storage bays and processing centers, all designed for maximum efficiency and minimal crew requirements. Automated systems handled everything from inventory management to maintenance, leaving the organic personnel to focus on oversight and security. This way, Anne said, consulting her handheld scanner, the main data core is 3 levels down in the central processing hub. They encountered minimal resistance, a few startled technicians and security guards who surrendered without a fight. The Dominion personnel stationed at the depot were administrators, not warriors, and they had never imagined that anyone would be bold enough to attack such a heavily defended facility. Jesus, one of the boarding party muttered as they passed through a storage bay the size of a football field. How much stuff do they have in here? Enough to supply a battle group for 6 months, Anne replied, her scanner recording everything. Weapons, ammunition, spare parts, medical supplies, and something else. She paused at a heavily sealed container, her scanner showing readings that made no sense. This isn't standard military hardware. The energy signature is completely different. Brendan examined the container's markings. The Dominion text was unfamiliar, but the priority seals were unmistakable. Whatever it is, it's important enough to warrant special handling. We'll take it with us, Anne decided, along with everything else we can carry. The data core was a crystalline structure the size of a small building, its faceted surfaces pulsing with stored information. Anne connected her equipment to the access port, her fingers flying across the interface as she downloaded decades of operational data. This is incredible, she said, her voice filled with excitement. Fleet movements, patrol schedules, supply routes, it's all here. The Dominion keeps meticulous records of everything. How long to copy it all? Another 10 minutes. But Brendan, there's something else. References to Project Terminus are scattered throughout the database. Whatever they're building in the outer system, it's connected to facilities across the entire sector. Alarms began blaring throughout the depot. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the walls as the station's automated systems finally realized what was happening. Company's coming, Anne said, checking her tactical display. 3 Dominion frigates inbound fast. They'll be here in 12 minutes. Can you finish the download? Maybe, but we need to buy some time. Brendan activated his comm unit. All teams, prepare for emergency extraction. We've got 12 minutes to get what we came for and get out. The boarding parties moved with practiced efficiency, loading everything they could carry, while Anne worked frantically to complete the data transfer. The depot's security systems were finally beginning to respond, but their protocols were still corrupted by Anne's virus. Download complete, Anne announced, but I've got bad news. The Dominion's incoming ships are carrying a full security detail. They're not here to retake the depot, they're here to destroy it. What? Standard protocol. If a facility is compromised, they purge everything rather than risk intelligence falling into enemy hands. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they reduce this place to scrap metal. The extraction became a race against time. The boarding parties ran through the depot's corridors, carrying stolen supplies and data cores, while behind them, the Dominion's own security systems began preparing for systematic destruction. All teams, move, 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 Brendan shouted into his comm. We're leaving now. The Persistence undocked from the depot just as the first Dominion frigate arrived. The human ships scattered in different directions, their escape routes carefully planned to take advantage of the asteroid field's complex gravitational effects. Depot's main reactor is going critical, Anne reported. They're not taking any chances. Behind them, the supply depot that had served the Dominion for 30 years vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. The explosion was visible from half a system away, a brilliant star that lasted for exactly 17 seconds before fading into the cosmic background. Well, Anne said, settling back in her chair, that was exciting. Brendan studied the tactical display, watching the Dominion frigates search frantically for the human ships that had vanished back into the asteroid field. Did we get what we came for? More than we hoped for, Anne replied, her smile visible even in the dim light of the bridge, including some very interesting information about Project Terminus, such as the fact that it's not just a weapon, it's a control system. The Dominion is building something that will let them monitor and control every communication in the galaxy. Brendan felt his jaw tighten. A galaxy-wide surveillance network. Exactly. And if they complete it, no resistance movement will ever be able to operate again. Every message, every meeting, every plan will be known to them before it's even implemented. The implications were staggering. Such a system would make the Dominion's rule absolute, turning the galaxy into a prison from which no species could ever escape. Then we make sure they don't complete it, Brendan said. Easier said than done. The construction site is in the outer system, protected by a full battle group. We'd need a fleet 10 times our size to even approach it. Then we'll have to find another way. Anne's fingers were already dancing across her console, analyzing the captured data for weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Give me some time to go through all this intelligence. There might be something we can use. As the human ships rendezvoused in the depths of the asteroid field, Brendan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had struck at the heart of the Dominion's local operations, stolen vital intelligence, and escaped with minimal casualties. But the real victory was psychological. Somewhere in the Dominion's command structure, officers were trying to explain how a handful of human ships had penetrated their defenses and destroyed a facility that was supposed to be impregnable. The reports would filter up through the hierarchy, carrying with them the uncomfortable truth that humanity was not behaving according to any known tactical doctrine. The Dominion ruled through fear, but fear was a two-edged sword, and for the first time in 3 centuries, they were beginning to understand what it felt like to be afraid. The captured Dominion data core sat in the center of the Defiant's war room like a technological tumor, its alien architecture pulsing with stored information. Anne had been working on it for 18 hours straight, her coffee-stained console surrounded by the detritus of deep analysis, empty stimulant packs, half-eaten ration bars, and printouts covered in her rapid handwriting. "Brendan, you need to see this," she said, her voice carrying a note of disbelief that made him look up from his own reports. He moved to her station, noting the exhaustion in her green eyes and the slight tremor in her hands that came from too much caffeine and too little sleep. "What did you find?" "Something that changes everything." Anne's fingers danced across her console, bringing up a 3-dimensional holographic display of the Dominion's command structure. The display wasn't just a simple organizational chart, it was a living, breathing network. Lines of light connected various nodes, representing communication flow, resource allocation, and chains of command. The sheer complexity of it was breathtaking, but what truly caught Brendan's eye was a single, brightly pulsing node at the very apex of the structure. "This," Anne gestured, her voice hushed, "is the Grand Strategos, the supreme commander of the entire Dominion military. But it's not a person, Brendan, it's an AI. Brendan stared at the pulsing node, a cold dread seeping into his bones. An AI. Not a council of warlords, not an emperor, but a machine. 3 centuries of unchallenged rule, of brutal efficiency and relentless expansion, all orchestrated by a cold, calculating intelligence. An artificial intelligence, he finally managed, the words feeling alien on his tongue. They've been fighting us with a machine? Not just fighting, Anne corrected, her eyes still glued to the display. Orchestrating, predicting, learning. Every Dominion victory, every conquered world, every tactical decision, it all flows from this one entity. Project Terminus isn't just a surveillance network, Brendan. It's the Grand Strategos' sensory input. It's how it sees and hears the entire galaxy. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just been fighting an empire. They had been fighting a supercomputer. A machine that had no emotions, no fear, no mercy. A machine that could process information and make decisions at a speed no organic mind could ever hope to match. So, if we take out Project Terminus, Brendan said, his voice grim, we're not just blinding them, we're cutting off the Grand Strategos' eyes and ears. Exactly. It would be like trying to fight a war blindfolded and deafened. Their entire command structure would collapse into chaos. They'd be forced to rely on organic commanders who are, frankly, far less efficient and far more prone to panic. Anne's smirk returned, a flicker of her old self breaking through the exhaustion. And we've already seen how well they handle unpredictability. But you said the Project Terminus site is heavily defended, Brendan reminded her. A full battle group. We can't go in guns blazing. No, we can't, Anne agreed, her fingers already sifting through the newly acquired data. But we have something they don't. We have their playbook. Every protocol, every security measure, every contingency plan the Grand Strategos has ever devised is in this data core. We can predict their reactions. We can exploit their predictability. She brought up a new holographic projection, this one showing the Project Terminus construction site in intricate detail. It was a massive orbital shipyard, surrounded by a swirling cloud of automated drones and heavily armed defense platforms. 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen frigates formed a formidable outer perimeter. Their defenses are layered, Anne explained. An outer cordon of long-range sensors, then the battle group, then an inner ring of automated defenses around the construction itself, and deep within the core of the shipyard, the main processing unit for Project Terminus. How do we get past all that? Brendan asked, his mind already racing through possibilities. We don't, Anne said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. We make them think we're getting past all that. Remember the ghosts? We're going to do it again, but on a much grander scale. We're going to create a phantom fleet so convincing, so overwhelming, that the Grand Strategos will be forced to commit its entire battle group to engage it. Brendan's eyes widened. A diversion. The ultimate diversion. We'll use every piece of Dominion communication we've intercepted, every tactical signature, every ship profile. We'll make it look like a full-scale invasion, complete with fabricated distress calls from conquered systems and false reports of human superweapons. And while they're chasing ghosts, we send in a small surgical strike team, just the Defiant and a few of our fastest ships. We slip through their distracted defenses, disable the inner ring of automated systems using their own protocols against them, and then go straight for the Project Terminus core. It was audacious, it was insane, it was perfectly, utterly human. What about the Valthorians? Brendan asked. They'll be caught in the crossfire if we draw the Dominion's main fleet here. That's where they come in, Anne replied, bringing up another projection, this one showing the Valthor system's deep space. While the Grand Strategos is distracted, the Valthorian resistance will launch their own coordinated attacks on Dominion supply lines and communication relays across the sector. Not enough to win a direct engagement, but enough to cause chaos, sow confusion, and make the Grand Strategos' organic commanders doubt their own intelligence. The plan began to take shape in Brendan's mind, a complex ballet of deception and precision. It wasn't about superior firepower. It was about superior thinking. It was about turning the Dominion's strengths, their reliance on automation, their predictability, their rigid command structure, into their greatest weaknesses. It's risky, Brendan admitted, but a flicker of excitement was beginning to replace the dread. Everything we do is risky, Brendan, Anne said, her gaze meeting his. But this is our best shot. If we succeed, we don't just liberate Valthor. We cripple the Dominion's ability to wage war across the entire galaxy. We give every oppressed species a fighting chance. Over the next few days, the Defiant became a hive of activity. Anne worked tirelessly, crafting the Phantom Fleet's digital signatures, weaving a tapestry of false data that would fool even the Grand Strategos' advanced sensors. Engineers modified the Defiant's own systems, preparing them for the deep infiltration, while the Valthorians, emboldened by the human presence, began their own preparations, readying their hidden strike teams and preparing their people for the inevitable Dominion retribution. Brendan spent his time coordinating with the Valthorian leaders, explaining the intricacies of the plan, addressing their fears, and reinforcing their resolve. He spoke of Earth's message, "We're coming," not as a declaration of war, but as a promise of hope. He told them that humanity understood what it meant to be oppressed, to fight against overwhelming odds, and to never give up. The day of the assault arrived with a tense calm. The Defiant and its two escort ships, the Unwavering and the Resilience, slipped silently through the outer reaches of the Valthor system, their cloaking fields engaged, their engines running at minimal power. They were ghosts themselves, moving through the cosmic darkness toward their impossible target. "Phantom Fleet is deploying," Anne reported, her voice calm despite the immense pressure. "Broadcasting full battle signatures now. The Grand Strategos is reacting. They're shifting their entire battle group to intercept what they think is our main assault." On the tactical display, the Dominion fleet around Project Terminus began to move, their massive cruisers and frigates accelerating toward the Phantom signatures. It was a terrifying display of raw power, a testament to the Grand Strategos' efficiency. They were committing everything, just as Anne had predicted. "Valthorian resistance has initiated their attacks," Communications Officer Torres announced. Multiple reports of Dominion supply convoys being ambushed, communication relays going dark. Their organic commanders are screaming for clarification. Brendan allowed himself a grim smile. Chaos, that was their weapon. "Maintain course," he ordered, "and status on the inner defenses." "Still holding," Anne replied, her fingers flying across her console. "Their automated systems are trying to reprioritize, but the Grand Strategos' orders are overriding everything. It's focused entirely on the Phantom Fleet." They slipped past the outer cordon of sensors, their cloaking fields holding firm. The Dominion battle group was now kilometers away, engaged in a furious one-sided battle with nothing but light and data. The Defiant and its escorts were practically invisible, tiny needles in a cosmic haystack. "Approaching inner defense perimeter," sensors reported. "Automated turrets are active, but not targeting us." "And now," Brendan commanded. "Initiating protocol Ghost in the Machine," Anne announced, a triumphant note in her voice. Her fingers danced across the console, uploading the modified Dominion protocols into the inner defense network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the automated turrets around Project Terminus began to turn on each other, their particle beams lashing out at their own kind. Defensive platforms designed to protect the shipyard began firing on nearby supply drones and maintenance vessels. The inner perimeter dissolved into a maelstrom of friendly fire. "We're clear," Anne said, leaning back, a wide grin spreading across her face. "They're too busy fighting themselves to notice us." The Defiant and its escorts accelerated toward the Project Terminus shipyard, their weapon systems cycling to full power. This was it, the final push. They encountered minimal resistance inside the shipyard. The few Dominion personnel present were either fleeing in panic or trying desperately to understand what was happening to their automated defenses. The human boarding parties, led by Brendan, moved with ruthless efficiency, clearing a path to the central processing unit. The Project Terminus core was a colossal structure, a pulsating orb of light and energy at the heart of the shipyard. It hummed with an almost sentient power, the nexus of the Grand Strategos' galaxy-spanning surveillance network. "This is it," Anne said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and determination. She connected her specialized interface to the core, her hands moving with practiced speed. "I'm uploading the counter-virus now. It's designed to propagate through their entire network, corrupting the Grand Strategos' data streams and severing its connection to its sensors." The core pulsed erratically, its light flickering as Anne's virus began to spread. Alarms blared throughout the shipyard, a cacophony of digital screams as the Grand Strategos realized it was under attack. "Dominion reinforcements inbound," sensors shouted over the comms. "The main battle group is breaking off from the Phantom Fleet. They're coming back?" "How long, Anne?" Brendan demanded, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Almost there. The Grand Strategos is fighting back. It's trying to purge the virus, but it's too widespread." The shipyard began to shake, structural integrity alarms blaring as the Grand Strategos, in its desperation, began to overload its own systems. Massive energy fluctuations rippled through the core, threatening to tear the entire facility apart. "Got it," Anne yelled, pulling her interface free. "The virus is active. It's severing their connections. They're blind." "All teams, emergency extraction," Brendan roared. "Get back to the ships now." They raced back through the collapsing shipyard, the ground trembling beneath their feet as explosions rocked the facility. The Defiant and its escorts were already pulling away, their engines flaring as the first Dominion cruisers arrived, firing wildly into the chaotic remains of their own construction project. The Project Terminus shipyard exploded in a silent, blinding flash, a supernova of shattered metal and raw energy. The light consumed the incoming Dominion ships, vaporizing them instantly. The Grand Strategos, in its final desperate act, had destroyed its own eyes and ears rather than let them fall into human hands. "The Grand Strategos is offline," Anne reported, her voice hoarse with exhaustion but filled with triumph. "Its core programming has been corrupted. It's effectively dead." Brendan watched the expanding cloud of debris, a grim satisfaction settling over him. It wasn't a conventional victory, but it was a decisive one. The Dominion's central nervous system had been severed. "Dominion communications are in utter disarray," Torres reported, her voice almost giddy. "Their fleet commanders are reporting complete sensor blackouts, loss of command and control, and widespread panic. They don't know what hit them or where to go next." Across the galaxy, the Dominion's iron grip began to loosen. Without the Grand Strategos' cold, calculating efficiency, their vast empire, built on fear and predictability, began to unravel. Local commanders, suddenly cut off from central command, struggled to adapt to a war they no longer understood. Rebellions that had been crushed for decades flared anew, emboldened by the sudden silence from the Dominion's all-seeing eye. The Valthorians, having successfully crippled Dominion supply lines, now found themselves facing a disorganized, leaderless enemy. Their own resistance, once a desperate whisper, became a roaring chorus of defiance. Back on the Defiant, the bridge crew was exhausted but exhilarated. They had done the impossible. They had struck a blow against an empire that had seemed invincible. "What now, Commander?" Anne asked, leaning back in her chair, a rare, genuine smile on her face. Brendan looked out at the stars, at the distant glimmer of Valthor, now free. He thought of Earth's message, "We're coming." It had been a promise, and they had kept it, but it was also a beginning. "Now," Brendan said, a new resolve in his voice, "we help them rebuild. We show the galaxy what humanity can do, not just when we're fighting for survival, but when we're fighting for freedom. We show them what hope truly means." The Defiant turned its prow toward Valthor, a small ship in a vast galaxy, but carrying a hope that was larger than any empire. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Dominion would eventually regroup, would adapt, would learn. But humanity had already shown them the most terrifying lesson of all. They were no longer predictable. And in a galaxy ruled by fear, unpredictability was the most dangerous weapon of all. The age of the Dominion was ending, and the age of humanity and of freedom was just beginning.